The following program, NORML Show Live, is intended for responsible adults only. We advocate for the repeal of marijuana prohibition for adults. We discuss the science, culture, and controversy about America's marijuana laws. We do not advocate or encourage any illegal activity and advise all listeners to learn their state and federal marijuana laws by visiting norml.org, NORML.org. Opinions and claims made by guests and advertisers of NORML Show Live are their own and do not necessarily reflect the philosophy and policies of NORML. Listener discretion is advised.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
From the promise of legalization.
And I think we need to rethink and recriminalize our marijuana laws.
To the agony of prohibition.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
The National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws presents NORML Show Live, Marijuana Nation. Now, here's your host, NORML's Outreach Coordinator, Radical Russ Belville.
Good afternoon, tokers and tokettes. It is Tuesday, November 16th, 2010, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Thanks for joining us for the next 60 minutes of news, talk, interviews, information, music, comedy, and more by, for, and about the cannabis community. We're coming to you live and direct from our studio, Rolla J Studios here in Portland, Oregon, and from our virtual studios in Grastoria, Oregon, with my good friend, Cannabis Carrie.
Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday, Carrie.
It is Tuesday, right?
It is. It's still Tuesday. I know your circadian rhythms are all messed up from all the different jobs you do, but it is Tuesday today.
Nice. I like Tuesdays.
Tuesdays are a good day. Today on the show, we're going to be getting an interview from the California Marijuana Report at 30 past, interview with Mark Emery's wife, Jody, that we'll be bringing to you. And then at the end of the show, I've got an extended radical rant that I've got to get on about the religious use of cannabis. Turns out I've really angered one of our fans with my opinions on that. And hey, that's the way it goes sometimes. So you hear my opinion on the religious use argument. Today is also Electric Tuesday, so we'll be bringing you some dance music. I found some good funky house dance music for today's Electric Tuesday Daily Toker Tune. But before all that, we do our hemp headlines with Cannabis Carrie. What is in the news today, Carrie?
Well, we're going to go over two new regulations from different coasts of the United States of America, and also a confirmation hearing tomorrow that has some activists shaking their heads.
Oh, yeah. We'll give you all the details you need on those confirmation hearings. We're, of course, talking about Michelle Leonhardt for the DEA, and we've got to get you on the line to your legislators in the Senate, that is, your senators, to tell them to oppose the nomination of Bush's DEA administrator. We'll talk all about that in the hemp headlines and more coming up here on NORML Show Live. We are the voice of the Marijuana Nation. We're here every weekday, Monday through Friday at 1 p.m. Pacific. Also, stay tuned for Hour 2, our live hour. We'll be taking your calls, comments, and questions at 971-533-7111. Be back right after this.
You're listening to NORML Show Live, the voice of the Marijuana Nation. You want to legalize it? Call your congressman today. 202-224-3121. It's free, it's easy, and you don't even have to give your name, just your zip code, and they'll hook you up to your congressman. Call 202-224-3121 and tell Congress you support marijuana legalization.
Liberate your mind. Liberate your mind. Liberate your mind, liberate your mind. That's what you got to do. Liberate your mind,
Sorry about that, Carrie. I ended the theme too quickly there for some reason. It's time for our normal news with Cannabis. Carrie, let's just go right to it.
I love it. The Oakland City Council last week approved an application process for commercial-scale medical marijuana grow-ops. That same night, the City Council also approved a separate measure doubling the number of dispensaries allowed in Oakland to be licensed to operate in the city from 4 to 8. Now, that move makes Oakland the first city in the nation to approve marijuana cultivation on such a large scale. City Council members said it was designed to take medical marijuana cultivation out of the shadows. Councilman Larry Reed told the San Francisco Chronicle after the vote that Oakland is a leader in the industry, and he's hoping that this will continue to grow. Under the regulations approved last Tuesday, applicants for the 4 grow licenses must undergo extensive financial background checks, provide security, and show themselves to be financially sound. The regulations also require that applicants pay back taxes for marijuana if they have sold to Oakland dispensaries over the last few years, as well as interest and penalties. Now, it's just unclear how much marijuana growers that may be seeking one of the 4 additional permits have sold to the city dispensaries for them to take the back tax rule. Much of the marijuana in the dispensaries in Oakland is produced by small growers. The council earlier this year promised to create regulations to include the small grower as well, but it hasn't enacted any rules that include them yet.
Yeah, going to get the big grows established before they get to that, I have a feeling. But, increasing from 4 to 8, doubling the number of established grows for Oakland, you've got to look at that as a good thing. But again, I think the city council really needs to get toward enacting legislation that will also allow the small growers to be involved in this process. Part of the reasoning why is that you want to maintain as much control over the genetic destiny of the plants within the hands of the people as possible. It might turn out, one of the scenarios that we have with prescription drugs, just to give you an analogy, is the so-called orphan drugs. And what happens with that is it's a scenario where if you're a big company and you're making money off of prescription drugs, you want to make it off of Andia or off of the very popular drugs that lots of people will be prescribed. Well, there are people that suffer from all sorts of diseases out there that aren't that prevalent, very rare diseases. And there's these obscure drugs that will help those people. And what happens is that no company wants to take up manufacturing those drugs because of all of the process that it takes to get through the FDA and all of the clinical trials that has to be done. And then just the manufacturing of the drug itself is not profitable for them if there's so few people that are going to need the drug. So I just fear that happening with medical marijuana in Northern California. I don't want to see it where it ends up centralized with just 8 grow centers and they most often wanting to grow the strains that are the most popular, whereas somebody who might need a high CBD strain, for example, might not have anywhere to turn. Where we have more growers involved in the process, where we've got the small growers involved in the process, we have more genetic diversity and more ability for the market to take care of those niche needs that some patients are going to have.
And back to New Jersey. In New Jersey, the state is grappling over rules and regulations with their new medical marijuana program set to begin next year. Governor Chris Christie's administration has drafted more and more strict rules for the program, leaving activists in his state and around the nation to question whether Christie is trying to bury the program before it even starts. The latest proposed implement of the New Jersey medical marijuana program is that doctors who recommend their patients to use cannabis to alleviate symptoms or suffering must make reasonable efforts at least every 3 months to wean their patients off of using medical marijuana. According to the state attorney general's office, the routine evaluations are necessary to ensure patients are not becoming addicts and that marijuana is actually easing their suffering. Just like the other draft proposals to restrict the already strict rules that were set out in law back in January, the law's sponsors expressed surprise and disappointment with the latest proposal, calling it an assault on the law that Christie inherited when he took office. Senator Nicholas Scutari and Assemblyman Reed Grascoria have sponsored a resolution awaiting a floor vote that would repeal the newly drafted medical marijuana program rules that the Department of Health and Senior Services has proposed. The rules that include limits on medical marijuana's potency and the restriction of just 2 outlets that would be able to grow marijuana to supply the entire state, where the law prohibits home grows, would make it too restrictive to benefit many who need it. Senator Scutari said about the newest rule that he did not envision doctors would be told they have to stop writing prescriptions. They should be left with the care of their own patients. Some activists like Roseanne Scotti of the Drug Policy Alliance of New Jersey said she believes the Christie administration is bogging down the new law with so many unnecessary and outrageous regulations that the program will not be workable. She says that there is no other medication that a doctor is required to wean their patients off of, even though there are many other drugs that have a much higher potential for abuse and addiction. Even with the proposed restrictions, already 56 doctors in New Jersey have filed intent online to be able to recommend patients into the program.
Well, yeah, this is exactly what that person was saying about Chris Christie just not wanting to implement this program. He just does not like medical marijuana. He doesn't want anyone smoking marijuana. He hates marijuana. Let's just be clear. Doesn't hate jelly donuts much, but boy, he sure hates marijuana, maybe as much as he hates salads. But enough of the fat jokes. I can't really be throwing those stones from within my glass house. Let's talk about this New Jersey program. First of all, they've already got it set up where there's only going to be 2 places where marijuana is going to be grown. There's only 3 strains that are going to be allowed to be grown. All those strains must be less than 10% THC, and there'll only be 4 centers in a state of 8.6 million people where the patients can get the medical marijuana. So right off the bat, you can already tell that they really have no intent in having a functioning system here. But then they also propose rules that the doctors have to register with the state, and the 56 doctors already have filled out that intent, but the doctors have to register as if the doctors are doing something criminal by recommending medical marijuana. We got to keep close tabs on them. Are you serious? This is how we treat educated professionals in the state of New Jersey, I guess. But then to say that the doctors have to try to counsel their patients to wean them off of medical marijuana every 3 months so that they don't become addicts is just ridiculous if you're not proposing that kind of restriction on OxyContin, Vicodin, Percocet, and about 17 other prescription drugs I could name. Once again, marijuana being put into the medical constriction there is being treated worse than all of the other drugs that are already in the medical restrictions. This is insane. Only through legalization can patients really, truly get the access to the medicine they need without these insane restrictions. The only reason Governor Christie is doing all of this stuff is because he still wants to maintain the criminality of marijuana, which continues to exist even when you pass a medical marijuana law. Let's get on the ball and legalize for everyone, even us healthy people.
And the acting head of the DEA, Michelle Leonhardt, will be officially confirmed tomorrow by the Senate Judiciary Committee. Leonhardt was nominated by President George W. Bush to be the administrator after replacing Karen Tandy back in 2007 and has been the acting administrator for the last 3 years. Opposition from pro-marijuana groups like NORML and the Marijuana Policy Project and hemp activists as well were not enough to keep President Obama from renominating her as the administrator back in February. Her nomination was put on a back burner for the last several months as it languished in committee so the administration could deal with other business, most notably addressing a backlog of judicial nominations and preparing for the confirmation hearings of Elaine Kagan to the Supreme Court. But the time is here, and to the dismay of medical marijuana and cannabis law reform groups, her position will be solidified tomorrow on Wednesday. Leonhardt was a special agent in charge of the DEA's Los Angeles office from 1998 to 2004 and the DEA deputy administrator from 2003 to 2007. She presided over hundreds of raids on medical marijuana patients in dispensaries during the years before the October 2009 Holder announcement. Even after the Holder announcement last year to stop prosecuting patients and providers whose actions are in clear compliance with existing state laws, raids have continued, although in smaller numbers. There have been more than 30 raids of medical marijuana providers since the Holder announcement under her watch. Americans for Safe Access have sent out an alert to their members denouncing her reign as the acting head of the DEA, citing the paramilitary-style raids designed to undermine safe access and the implementation of state medical marijuana marijuana programs. Leonhardt has also overturned a DEA administrative law judge's decision to issue a license to UMass Amherst professor Lyle Cracker to grow marijuana for FDA-approved research. Vote Hemp is also opposing Leonhardt's confirmation because she has continued to block hemp production in the U.S. and has failed for 3 years running now to respond to several applications from North Dakota licensed farmers to grow industrial hemp. They are accusing her of maintaining the ridiculous notion that hemp is marijuana. Many of the cannabis law reform groups have organized phone call-in campaigns to try and derail her nomination, and Americans for Safe Access have provided a list of questions for the committee to ask her tomorrow at the confirmation hearing. One of the questions is how rating medical marijuana providers was an efficient use of DEA resources. And another is when the DEA might get around to deciding the status of a 2002 petition to reschedule marijuana. But it seems as though the Judiciary Committee isn't really interested in blocking her nomination, and she is expected to sail through the process.
Well, this is a shame, this Michelle Leonhardt thing, and I want to encourage all of our listeners to get on the phone and contact the members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. I have them on the screen here, and I'm trying to make it so that you can actually, read their names. It's a little tough here sometimes with the old internets. But Patrick Leahy, the independent, he's a Democrat, Democrat from Vermont. Herb Cole, Democrat from Wisconsin. Jeff Sessions, Republican from Alabama. Dianne Feinstein, Democrat from California. I don't know how that well will go. Orrin Hatch, a Republican of Utah. Russ Feingold, Democrat of Wisconsin. Definitely somebody who could be on our side. Chuck Grassley, the exact opposite. Someone who hates marijuana, Republican of Iowa. Arlen Specter, Democrat of Pennsylvania. John Kyle, Republican of Arizona. Chuck Schumer, Democrat of New York. Lindsey Graham, Republican of South Carolina. Dick Durbin, Democrat of Illinois. John Cornyn, Republican of Texas. Benjamin Cardin, Democrat of Maryland. Tom Coburn, forget that, Republican of Oklahoma. Sheldon Whitehouse, Democrat of Rhode Island. Amy Klobuchar from Minnesota, Democrat, and Ted Kaufman, Democrat from Delaware. Al Franken, Democrat from Minnesota. This is all available at judiciary.senate.gov. That's judiciary.senate.gov, and you can get all their names. Any one of those you click, it'll take you to their offices. You can contact them and tell them to oppose Michelle Leonhardt as the head of the DEA. Now, I wanted to take the opportunity to tell you a little bit about Ms. Leonhardt, and from a great post that was put up in the Hill blog by our own Paul Armentano. First of all, you've got to realize that she was the interim DEA director under George W. Bush, right? So President Obama only kept two people from the Bush administration to continue on to his administration, and they both had to do with war. The Secretary of Defense, Robert Gates, and this DEA administrator, Michelle Leonhardt. Funny how he still wants to do war the Republican Bush way. But anyway, as we look at this, Michelle Leonhardt has not only overseen at least 30 federal raids on medical marijuana providers and producers, she's actually raided laboratory facilities that test cannabis potency and purity, right? Some of these labs that the dispensaries send their cannabis to have it tested for percentage of THC, CBD, and so on. Yeah, raided a lab, okay? And these actions by Michelle Leonhardt are in complete contradiction to the October 19th, 2009 Department of Justice memo that said federal officials should no longer, quote, focus resources on individuals whose actions are in clear and unambiguous compliance with existing state laws providing for the medical use of marijuana, end quote. Just for not following the directives of the boss should she not be considered for DEA administrator. But let's go on to her further activities that disqualify her for this position. She's neglected to reply to an 8-year-old petition that calls for administrative hearings regarding rescheduling marijuana for medical use, called for in 2009 by the American Medical Association so that they can develop clinical research on cannabinoid-based medicines. She also refused to issue a license to UMass's Professor Craker to cultivate marijuana for FDA research, despite the DEA's own administrative law judge saying it would be in the public interest to do so. But to me, the most reprehensible reasons for not approving Michelle Leonhardt as DEA administrator have to do with her rhetoric about the violence and the death and the slaughters in Mexico. She has described the 31,000 deaths since December of 2006 as a sign of success. 31,000 dead Mexicans she considers a sign of success. Quote, our view is that the violence we have been seeing is a signpost of the success of our very courageous Mexican counterparts. The cartels are acting out like caged animals because they are caged animals, end quote. So I encourage everyone, contact your senators, the listing Senate or judiciary.senate.gov, and tell them for these reasons and more, it is wrong to confirm Michelle Leonhardt as head of the DEA. Get someone in there who will respect the Holder memo, who will end the DEA raids on medical marijuana, and will at least listen to the American Medical Association and their own judges when it comes to formulating sensible marijuana policy. Woo, boy, that's a little mini rant right here in the middle of the show. That means I got to take a break. Go to my happy place. We'll be back right after this with your Daily Toker Tunes.
It's 20 after the hour, and we have to take a short break, if you know what I mean. Please support these sponsors who support NORML Show Live.
Oh, have you ever met that funny reefer man? A reefer man. Have you ever met that funny reefer man? A reefer man. If he said he swam to China, he would send you South Carolina. Then you know you're talking to that reefer man.
When I was in England, I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it. And didn't inhale, and never tried it again.
I think you'd probably be a lot cooler if you had, Mr. President.
Said, hey, do you have a joint case? Sure would be hot cooler if you did. Lie, don't hide it. Oh, lie, don't hide it. Just lie, don't hide it. Fire up right now.
It's time for your Daily Toker Tunes, the best in 420-friendly music from all genres that uplifts, entertains, and informs the public. Today we bring you tunes for Electric Tuesday, our segment featuring the best of modern electric music in the genres of dance, new age, house, and experimental. Brought to you by Sarah Kant in Boston, Massachusetts, and Sarah Kant Photography. If you'd like to submit your song to be played on NORML Show Live, send it to us at stash@normal.org. Now here's some more great independent marijuana music for today's Daily Toker Tunes.
Welcome back, Tokers, and Sarah is still out on maternity leave. We'll get her back soon, I'm sure, but before we do, I get to take the Electric Tuesday duties, and today I bring you some music from DJ Derek Dunbar and a tune he's got called Breakin' Down. As a versatile musician, producer, and seasoned DJ, Derek Dunbar establishes himself as an authority on quality. With his musical upbringing, Derek's spectrum of sound ranges from hip-hop and soulful downtempo to his distinct underground house grooves and everything in between. Music is nothing new to Derek. In fact, you could say it's in his blood. His father wrote songs for bands and artists like Frida Payne, Chairman of the Board, and Parliament Funkadelic. At an early age, Derek would watch as his father composed on the piano, which, at 4 years old, made him want to take lessons. After just a few lessons, his teacher was so impressed with his raw talent that she noted, "All he needs is a book and some practice. He'll do just fine on his own." Derek's When House Was House EP is a well-balanced musical journey through his selectively simple style. Breakin' Down brings the old-school funk with its sampled guitar riffs and live drum kit. This is the kind of groove that's perfect for enjoying a nice sativa and the company of a very special friend. Can you dig it? This is DJ Derek Dunbar with Breakin' Down. You can get a download of this from our blog at stash.normal.org.
You want a copy of that song for your iPod? Check out the Daily Toker Tunes at the Stash blog by surfing to stash.normal.org and choosing Media, and then Toker Tunes from the main menu.
Starfish Designs, makers of the original Gandalf.
I'm Radical Russ, and when I want to relax, I always have my 17-inch long original Gandalf from Starfish Designs nearby. The hand-blown borosilicate glass is strong and easy to clean, and the design is sleek and sophisticated. Starfish Designs are available from Bend, Oregon at a glass retailer near you. For locations, call 541-788-GLASS. That's 541-788-4527.
Just say no.
No matter what you call it, it's a huge part of popular culture.
Where'd you learn that, Cheech? Drug school.
You don't need weed school. You just need a copy of the new book, Pot Culture, the A to Z Guide to Stoner Language and Life.
Hey, this is great, man.
Even if you never smoked marijuana.
I never used marijuana. Sorry.
Don't think you smoked marijuana.
I experimented with marijuana a time or two and didn't inhale.
Or you used to smoke marijuana.
I inhaled frequently. That was the point.
Pot Culture by former High Times editor Steve Bloom and Shirley Halperin will answer every question you ever had about marijuana culture.
Has that marijuana made it back up here yet?
Check out Pot Culture, the A to Z Guide to Stoner Language and Life at Amazon.com or visit potculturebook.com today.
Too bad, man. I just stopped smoking yesterday.
California has long been the epicenter of marijuana law reform in the United States. We're joined now by Eric Brenner, the producer of the California Marijuana Report, for an interview with an important figure in cannabis in the Golden State. You can hear the entire California Marijuana Report on KRXA AM 540 in Monterey. Now, here's Eric Brenner.
Hi, this is Cheech Mayer, and you listen to Eric Brenner on the California Marijuana Report.
And we continue to follow a breaking news story here on the California Marijuana Report. Mark Emery, the Crown Prince of Pot, was designated to serve his time at the Taft Correctional Facility here in Taft, California. We have an update on this situation. Mark, of course, was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison for his role in selling marijuana seeds through the mail. Jody Emery, his wife, is now joining us here on the California Marijuana Report. Jody, welcome back to the show. Give us an update on your husband, Mark Emery, and his whereabouts within the federal correctional system.
CTAC FDC before his sentencing and shortly after, but then he was designated to Taft in California. At one point, about a month ago it's been now, he was moved to Nevada Southern Detention Center in Nevada, and it's a brand new private facility for holding inmates as they're transferred around. We thought he would only be there for a couple days and then move to Taft, but after 3 weeks of being there, he was getting quite distraught. I mean, there's no mail or books or anything there, and very disorienting. So he was happy to be moving out of Nevada Southern after 3 weeks, but to our surprise, he ended up in Oklahoma City. Now, there's a gigantic prisoner sorting facility there. It's right next to the airport, so the prisoner airplanes can pull right up to the facility and drop off inmates. And that's where Mark is currently right now, waiting to be transferred to his designated facility. Our surprise was that he wasn't moved to Taft from Nevada, since it was so close by, but to find him all the way over in Oklahoma. And then he was told that he has now been redesignated to Georgia.
And we're speaking today with Jody Emery right here on the California Marijuana Report. Jody is the wife of Mark Emery, who is in the midst of some diesel therapy, courtesy of the Bureau of Prisons and the Department of Justice, right here in the United States of America, for selling seeds through the mail. Millions of those seeds through the mail, and millions of plants arose out of the ground because of Mark Emery mailing those people the seeds. Now he's in handcuffs on a bus going to Georgia. Jody, tell me, we had a deal here, I thought, that he was going to Taft. What happened? Why did the Bureau of Prisons change their mind?
Well, the deal never included going to Taft. All federal prisoners have their judge is able to recommend a facility. And in Mark's sentencing, where he agreed to 5 years to avoid the 30 years to life, Mark agreed to be sentenced, but there was no say about exactly where he would go. He requested Lompoc in California, or Lompoc, I suppose it's called, and he was given Taft as his designated facility. However, the prison, Mark found that out from his lawyer that we just hired, his treaty transfer specialist lawyer, and she was the one who found out for us that he was going to Taft. And while Mark was in Seattle, and he was telling me that he was going to Taft, and I was writing about it and publicizing it online, one of the guards pulled Mark aside, or one of the lieutenants, and got upset with him and said, "How do you know you're going to Taft? No one is supposed to know where they're going." And I guess that is true. Most federal inmates do not know where they're supposed to be going. All they know is where they've received recommendation to be sentenced. But the BOP, the Bureau of Prisons, does this regularly. They move prisoners all across the United States, and if you go to prisontalk.com and read the reports from families and loved ones of inmates, you'll see that the BOP's technique of moving inmates far away from their family is a regular occurrence, and they just don't care to give this possible facility he could be from me intentionally. But I do know that a lot of inmates in the Federal Bureau of Prisons suffer the same sort of treatment, and I don't know if it's specific or, made up from some decision on high, but the same results occur. So it's unfortunate.
So what is the reasoning behind doing that? I mean, it seems to me that the people making the decisions to move the prisoners as far away from the families as possible, like you said, this is diesel therapy, is what it's known as among the inmates. Why, other than being cruel? When asked this question to the authorities at the Bureau of Prison, why do you do this to the families? Why move someone clear across the country? What is their answer?
I would say there's two reasons. The one is that it is just plain cruelty. The United States incarceration complex, the prison industry, is built on destroying lives. They mean to ruin the lives of people they see as lesser human beings. They see criminals and lawbreakers as sinners who need to be punished, and the punishment is supposed to be just going to prison, but they choose to make it even worse with extra punishment on top. Many terrible things happen at SeaTac while Mark was there. They decided to cover up all the windows so the inmates who couldn't even go outside and couldn't get fresh air or sunlight at all were then cut off from even seeing out their windows. And then they took away the guitar and music room that they had at that prison, and they canceled in-person visits for inmates who were in solitary confinement on Father's Day. So I saw families being turned away, not allowed to see their loved ones just because of some stupid new rule by the BOP. So they do this that's part of their that's part of their essence. That's why they exist, to punish people. But the other part is the money, because there's so much money in the prison industry. I'm talking billions of dollars. And one of the tragic things is, if you want to go look up the GEO group that controls the prison Mark is headed, on the front page they list the current stock price of shares to invest in this private prison company. And there are numerous prison companies that do the exact same thing, and their website is all about how they bring money to people and they get huge returns on their investment, and they're going to make $500 million from the federal government this year, and it's sick. There's these horrible private prison industries who make it bare bones minimum. And even the facility Mark is going to, when I read about the state prison and how it was run by a private prison group, the guards who worked there were complaining that they were in danger and they were being stabbed, and some guards were even killed, and they're not being protected by their bosses.
Jody, the three of us, Mark, you, and me, we're all part of the Libertarian Party, the California Marijuana Report. The show is based on libertarian values. When a free marketeer is told that a private company is running what is normally a government bureaucracy driven industry, which is the prison industry, we may be more inclined to maybe encourage something like that and encourage private industry to run, which is normally a government bureaucracy. But you're telling me the food, the health care, and the safety of the prisoners may well be even more compromised because of this privately run prison.
Well, you're absolutely right. It should be better when run by a private industry. But unfortunately, most private companies in any area create a product or a service that people want, and they need to continue getting people's approval and satisfaction with the product or service in order to stay in business. When you're dealing with prisoners who have no say and they're treated like cattle and not human beings, there's nobody that you need to please or have approval from besides the federal government who writes your checks and your stockholders who see that you're making money. And the only way to really make money by running a private prison is to cut services. So, one guard for 300 inmates, that's not going to work out. The inmates run prisons when you only have one guard per 300 inmates. They cut back on medical services. So where Mark was in southern Nevada, and that was a private prison, he said it took a month just to see a doctor because there was one doctor for 800 inmates, and that's a cost-cutting measure. So there are reports I've read, I believe it was Reason Magazine had an article about how private prisons do save the taxpayers money because their money isn't being used to run the prisons, but it's absolutely wrong. That's one thing government probably should do is run prisons and run the private industry to run prisons. They need, like a hotel, to fill their beds. They need to constantly have growth, and they do. Like I said, this prison Mark's going to is brand new. Just signed a contract, got millions of dollars from the government to start filling it up with inmates, and then they need to build other prisons to take the old inmates. And it's the biggest growing industry in the United States is incarceration, and that's just wrong. It's wrong to put peaceful, nonviolent people in prison to make a profit, and that's where my free market and libertarian type ideas, I find conflict with this, because I do not think it's right for private industry to be running prisons unless there's some sort of accountability to the inmates and the families of inmates, but that's never going to happen because, again, the whole point of prison is to punish inmates and treat them like animals.
And we're speaking here with Jody Emery on the California Marijuana Report this week. Jody, of course, going through a very tough time with her husband, Mark, who is in the midst of diesel therapy, courtesy of the Bureau of Prisons and the Department of Justice here in the United States of America. Mark Emery, of course, convicted of selling seeds through the mail to millions of people who went on to grow marijuana. And, of course, that is a crime here in the United States. We are working to change that. Jody, I know you worked very hard with all of us on trying to pass Proposition 19. We were 500,000 votes shy of victory. What are your thoughts, Jody Emery, on what went down here in California on November 2nd? And what are your thoughts on the future, particularly the election of 2012, November 2012, when we're going to see legal marijuana here in California?
Well, I think we're going to win next time around. Unfortunately, we're going to have to find a state that isn't so corrupted by the money, shall I say. Because California is an amazing wild, wild west wonderland of marijuana. And nobody there, I'm sure, will disagree with me that when you've got girls in little mini shorts and bathing suit tops advertising for a medical professional to sign your paper for $40, I mean, that's obviously taking advantage of the system that's in place to get people what they need and to satisfy California citizens, and that's great. I have nothing against the massive availability of marijuana and cuttings and seeds and everything down in California. But unfortunately, it's still illegal, and therefore all the prices are inflated by prohibition. I mean, up here in Canada, it's still completely illegal, and our government is introducing mandatory minimums and declaring a war on drugs, and it's really turned hellish up here over the last couple of years. Not many people know. But at least we haven't, got $300 ounces. I mean, you can still buy an ounce of weed here for $180 to $250. Down in California, this Compassion Club price of $300 to $400 an ounce is absolutely insane.
It's absolutely disgraceful.
And unfortunately, a lot of people are making big money off of the quasi-legal but still prohibited sale of marijuana. So you still have the inflated prices, which are typically inflated because of the risk involved. That's what prohibition does. It makes it dangerous, and therefore the price is higher to be involved with it. But in California, you've got this, not many people are going to prison, and a lot of people are getting away with massive grows and massive dispensaries, and there's great work being done. I have to stress that. There are a lot of great dispensaries and people doing amazing work down there, which is so needed. But at this point, there's so much money being made by the growers and by many compassion clubs that they don't want to go legitimate and pay taxes, and they don't want the price to drop. And, really, I can't blame them. When you're making big money, nobody wants to campaign for a change that would...
But Jody, to vote no on legalization because of your own pocketbook, because that is absolutely wrong.
How distraught I was to be down there and actually see on the ground, because up here in Canada we were online and you saw Dragonfly and Dennis, as good a man as he is, you saw these people sending out lies and scaring people. So not only did they effectively confuse a lot of people, but they did outright lying, and they're prohibition profiteers.
Well, we have a boycott in effect here. We sent out the press release on Facebook. I'm not sure if you saw it here on the California Marijuana Report, boycotting those who spread misinformation about Proposition 19. It's bad enough if you voted no, but if you actually went out like Dragonfly and many others and spread misinformation about what Proposition 19 would have done, you're going to be on our list here at the California Marijuana Report. We're boycotting you and your services. So we are fully aware of why this initiative went down, Jody. It is because of these so-called patient rights frauds, and we were there for them in the mid-'90s. And to vote no, to walk into that voting booth on November 2nd and vote no on marijuana legalization, really sad day to see so many take this initiative down. And those numbers up in Humboldt, Trinity, and Mendocino County were absolutely disgraceful. This initiative should have won by a landslide up there. We won 65% yes in Marin, 64% yes San Francisco, 63% yes Santa Cruz. This should have been 70, 80, 90% yes up in Humboldt, Mendocino, Trinity County, and all three counties in the Emerald Triangle. Proposition 19 went down to defeat. Those numbers are unacceptable. That being said, we came very close to a win on November 2nd. And Mark will one day be free. We are hoping that we will be able to get him back to Canada, as you mentioned earlier in the broadcast here, at least by next year, this time next year. What is the information, once again, Jody, that people have to phone and write to get Mark back to Canada within the next year?
Well, if you go to freemark.ca or just Google Mark Emery, we have a website that lists who is Mark Emery, what do we want, and how you can help, and ways to write to Mark, because right now he would love letters.
Jody Emery from up there in Canada, thank you so much for joining us today on the California Marijuana Report.
Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back after a word from these 420 friendly sponsors. Wait a minute. This is Internet radio. There are no dials here.
Have you considered medical marijuana? Double-blind, peer-reviewed studies have found cannabinoid therapies to be successful in treating the symptoms of Alzheimer's disease, ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, brain cancers, chronic pain, diabetes mellitus, dystonia, fibromyalgia, GI disorders, hepatitis C, HIV/AIDS, hypertension, incontinence, MRSA, multiple sclerosis, osteoporosis, pruritus, rheumatoid arthritis, sleep apnea, and Tourette's syndrome, as well as anecdotal evidence suggesting relief from anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress, plus reduction in the need for narcotic painkillers. Side effects of medical marijuana can include euphoria, relaxation, anxiety, panic reactions, paranoia, tachycardia, dry eyes, dry mouth, concentration and reaction time impairment, appetite increase, and in 37 states, arrest and incarceration. But medical marijuana is non-toxic and cannot cause overdose. Medical marijuana. It's not for everyone, but ask your doctor if medical marijuana may be right for you.
Hey, this is Willie Nelson for NORML. And I smoke pot and I like it a lot. I learned a long time ago that marijuana is a lot safer than alcohol. There's nothing wrong with the responsible use of marijuana by adults. It's time we stopped arresting and started respecting those who smoke marijuana responsibly. To learn what you can do to help, contact NORML at NORML.org or call toll-free 888-67-NORML.
You want answers? I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore. You want answers?
You have offended my family.
I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth.
And you have offended the Shaolin Temple.
You can't handle the truth.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical Rant. Welcome back, Tokers. Time for a little radical ranting. Before I do, a couple quick updates on the Attorney General's race in California. Kamala Harris has widened her lead over Steve Cooley. It was 45.9% to 45.7%. It's now 46% to 45.6%. She's up by 25,000 votes now, so it's looking even better that Kamala Harris will be the next Attorney General of the state of California. Also, wanted to give a shout out. Stereotype wanted me to remind people that today is the National Call-In Day for the National Criminal Justice Commission Act. That's the Senator Webb bill, Senator Webb from Virginia, the National Criminal Justice Commission Act, which is just kind of a backhanded way of getting at the drug war without calling it the drug war. It's about looking at our prison sentencing and how we need to overhaul our justice system, and you can't really look at that without looking at the drug war. So for more information on that, check out stopthedrugwar.org. They've got information for the National Call-In Day, which is today, to support Senator Webb's National Criminal Justice Commission Act. All right, let me get to the radical rant here, first of all. Our executive director, Alan St. Pierre, put up an article on hightimes.com about Roger Christie and the THC ministry and the fight for the religious use of cannabis. And one of my regular readers on the Stash blog lambasted that article by Alan, saying it was an attack on the church and the leader. So I got to fill in on this one, my own feelings. First of all, full disclosure for anyone who cares, I am an out and proud atheist. But I was raised in a Mormon background, and my entire family are born-again type Christians. So some people think maybe as an atheist that means I shouldn't comment on religious matters. I kind of think it makes me the best neutral observer possible because I don't favor any one religion over any other. And besides, my atheism isn't like real atheism. We could have a long discussion about it. It's more like Jeffersonian deism, but that's for another time. So anyway, let me say, first of all, I think all adults have a natural right to use cannabis, and for that matter, any other plants coming out of the ground, so long as they're not hurting anyone else. So sure, religion can be your reason for why you want to use cannabis, or your health care could be your reason for why you want to use cannabis, or maybe a Dave Matthews concert. I don't care. If you're an adult, you have the right to use cannabis. Now, second of all, I completely believe that our federal constitution protects a religious right to use cannabis. I think that the First Amendment right to freedom of religion should include people using cannabis in religious sense. I completely agree with that. So if the argument is about whether I support religious cannabis use, don't go there, because I do. I completely support religious cannabis use. However, if you want to try to get away with smoking marijuana by using a religious use defense in a United States court of law, You're not going to get it. It's not going to happen. No court in the United States is going to recognize a religion's right to use cannabis. Now, they have a reasoning behind this, and that is the government does have to recognize your First Amendment religious rights, unless doing so would put an undue burden on the government's enforcement of other laws. For example, suppose you belong to a religion that mandated the sacrifice of a virgin on the equinox. Well, obviously, you can't express that religious right because it would put an undue burden on the federal government's duty to protect the citizens from homicide, right? And that's an extreme example, but you get my point. So long as the government has the right to enforce laws, they can enforce those laws if it doesn't put an undue burden on your expression of religion or an undue burden on the government to prevent the breaking of laws. And the courts have affirmed so far that the Controlled Substances Act and its classification of cannabis in Schedule 1 gives them all the right they need to stop you from expressing your religious right to use cannabis. Now, at this point, this is where people usually bring up the fact that, wait a minute, there's all sorts of religions that get to use Schedule 1 drugs. There's those Brazilians that get to use the ayahuasca, the very potent hallucinogen, in their religious ceremonies. There's the Religious Freedom Restoration Act of 1993 that President Clinton signed that said that the government has to recognize religious rights and is used for that ayahuasca case. Or what about the Southwestern Indians and the people in Utah and Arizona and New Mexico that have the religious right to use peyote? That's a Schedule 1 substance, so why not cannabis? Well, here's why. Functionally, the courts know the minute they declare a religious right to use cannabis, there will suddenly be 26 million very religious people in the United States, and the government would have no way of stopping the non-religious people from using the cannabis. Basically, Rastafarians, Coptic Christians, THC ministry all suffers from the fact that their sacrament is too damn popular. And unfortunately, that's just the way it is. I'm not saying it's right. I'm telling you the way it is. Now, the other reasons why is that in those other cases with ayahuasca and peyote, the courts could kind of carve out an exception for them because it doesn't put an undue burden on the courts to enforce the other laws. For one, those churches go back centuries and have, generations worth of documented use, whereas most of these cannabis religions like THC ministry existed only in the 20th century. Okay, I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying this is the way they examine things. The people outside the churches that use ayahuasca or peyote is very, very, very small. So, if you legalize it for the Indians to use, it's not going to lead to a mass outbreak of everyone using it, because very few people use it. It's also very easy to identify the sincere adherents to those faiths. They belong to an Indian tribe. They share the same culture, for example. Most of these religious ministries like THC are comprised of people from all sorts of places and all sorts of backgrounds and all sorts of beliefs. And letting the tiny few people use peyote or ayahuasca is not going to be a problem for the government. Those are not the kind of drugs that are very popular or that people use often. Cannabis is. That's something people use quite a bit. It's the third most popular drug. They know if they carve out a religious exemption, that everyone will suddenly be religious. And again, I'm not saying it's right. I think under the First Amendment, the courts are making the wrong decisions here. I think that the popularity of the drug should not matter. But I'm not the Supreme Court. I'm not the courts. My job as working for NORML as an advocate for people that are cannabis consumers is to tell them the truth. And the truth is, if you try to claim a religious exemption in the United States for cannabis use, you're going to get plenty of time behind bars to study the Bible. You are going to jail if you try that. Now, the other problem that I have, beyond just that, is that Roger Christie and the THC ministry sell what is called a sanctuary kit, and this is directly from their website. $250 donation for a sanctuary kit includes plaques, ID cards, rule book, a manual to educate and empower new cannabis sacrament ministers, sacramental plant tags, and religion guide, and more. The kit includes a letter of good standing, which is a key document to acquire state permission to legally marry people as a cannabis sacrament minister. The THC ministry cannabis and religion guide is over 130 pages of research, case law, and articles and interviews concerning cannabis and religion. Included in the kit are real motions to dismiss marijuana charges written by lawyers and used successfully by members of our ministry. In other words, Roger Christie is selling to naive cannabis consumers for $250 a kit that promises sanctuary from marijuana charges. Now, I know some people claim this has worked for some people in the past, and if it has, if having a sanctuary kit has gotten you out of charges, great, good for you. But unless it works guaranteed for everyone, you cannot claim your $250 kit is going to provide them sanctuary from a jail cell. That's the problem I have with it. And the other problem I have with it is they've got donations coming in and marijuana going out, right? It's not like people go to Catholic church for how much wine they can get at the from the priest, right? And they're not paying per shot of wine, right? But that's what's happening at THC Ministry. People are paying per eighth or whatever. It's just marijuana dealing. Let's be honest about it. Oh, I'm going to get some letters and calls about this one. You want to talk about it? Join me in hour 2. Phone number's 971-533-7111.
This is NORML Show Live, the voice of the Marijuana Nation.
For Cannabis Carrie and Ganja John, who is out today, get well, Ganja John. I'm Radical Russ. Until next time, take care of each other, tokers.